Thank you very much for joining our discussion this afternoon. The last and final discussion of the day. I know some people may have stepped out to grab a snack or two, but we'll proceed in the interest of time so that we may have a fruitful discussion and, of course, lead into the closing ceremony. That said, I'm Mulanda Nkowani and I work for Digital Action, who are the conveners of the Global Coalition on Tech Justice that are calling for increased and improved safeguards on social media platforms ahead of the 2024 Year of Democracy cycle. Today we'll really be looking at 2024 as the Year of Democracy as it has been dubbed. We'll really be assessing platform safeguards and preparedness ahead of next year's elections. I have an esteemed lineup and panel to help us unpack this subject today. Before I hand over to them to briefly introduce themselves, just to note that some of our panelists will speak in French, so if we could quickly grab one of these devices. Indeed, it's been an insightful time being at this forum, and especially today's track that was really focused on platform accountability, and really my takeaway from a lot of the earlier sessions, including the one we just came from, is why aren't we having the lawmakers themselves on the panel and within the discussions to really speak to some of their perspectives. So I'm happy to say that today within this session, we have that representation from our honorable members of parliament who are also part of the African Parliamentary Network on Internet Governance, and we have some within the audience. And we also have a good mix and representation from civil society as well as researchers. So I'll now hand over to my panelists for a quick introduction, and perhaps we can start from that end, moving towards me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Devin Turner. I'm an attorney at the Legal Resources Centre South Africa. We're a public interest law NGO that works on human rights law and constitutional law. Our interest within this space is on our project called Democratizing Big Tech, which tries to hold big tech companies, especially the social media houses, accountable in terms of their obligations on elections and public participation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Honorable Lydia Lamisia Kanvarwa from Ghana, a member of Parliament and a member of African Parliamentarian Network on Internet Governance.
Hello, I'm Honorable Ayobangira Safari from DRC. For the later, I will speak in French. It will be more easier for me. For the introduction, I'm NP from DRC and also member for ABNIC, a member of the ICT committee in DRC.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Liz Orembo from Kiktanet.
Bonjour à tous, moi c'est Blaise Ndola, je viens de la République démocratique du Congo et je suis le Digital Protection Lead pour la région francophone au sein de Digital Defenders Partnership. Merci.
Thank you very much for those introductions. And just to set a bit of a context into our discussion, a lot has been said about 2024 being the year of elections, where we're expecting that over 65 plus elections will hold next year globally, and 18 of those being held right here on the African continent, from some of the biggest democracies like South Africa and Ghana, as well as some of the volatile or fragile countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo. Increasingly, we've seen that the proliferation of online threats across social media platforms such as hate speech, disinformation, incitement, manipulation of voter information, and other threats have potential to undermine electoral integrity and democracy. Such harms have also been seen to create distrust in democratic systems, destabilize political environments, and in severe cases could lead to real-world physical violence. We've seen a greater call for big tech to address these platform failures, with a lot of the recommendations pointing towards regulation, transparency, and accountability. At the center of this all, we see a global equity crisis whereby social media companies who are predominantly headquartered in global north countries and the regulators that are responsible for them have been negligent. I hope I'm not too fast for the translation. Have been negligent when it comes to dealing with the impacts of tech on the global majority. And yet, we still see that companies, the greater influence on information ecosystems and their related impacts in Africa are becoming more serious, intrusive, and frequent. It's on this backdrop that this session really will explore platforms' readiness for the 2024 election cycle, to really just hear from our panelists and really for them to highlight what's at stake for Africa in 2024 if platforms do not address some of these failures that we are seeing. And interestingly enough, we have representation from some of the election countries for next year. So we have South Africa, we have representation from someone from South Africa, someone from Ghana, and two people rather, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and of course Liz being someone that is coming from a country that held an election last year. Perhaps a bit more of housekeeping. I think it's also quite a big panel. I'll give each of our panelists a few minutes to really just unpack their reflections in relation to this topic at hand, and then we'll open up for a series of reflections from the audience, and then thereafter we'll close with some parting and final shots. So to start us off and really just set the tone for our conversation this afternoon, Devon, I'll start with you. So the Legal Resources Center, in partnership with Global Witness, recently published a study that exposes gaps in social media moderation of xenophobic hate in South Africa. Could you really just take us through some of those findings and the recommendations that came out of that, and really just your reflections as South Africa nears towards the election? Really, what sort of concerns do we see when it comes to platform failures and the tech harms that we are seeing online?
Thank you very much, Bulanda. Yes, so as Bulanda had mentioned, the RRC embarked on the joint investigation with Global Witness on content moderation. And we chose xenophobia as the topic for our investigation because in South African politics especially, it's been a hot topic issue where politicians have certainly been using xenophobic rhetoric to spread further hatred, and that has spread to especially so on social media. So on the basis of that then, with Global Witness, we embarked on this investigation whereby we would provide advertising. So the posting of the harmful content would not be through the organic means, so it wouldn't be just an ordinary post that is made on the social media platforms. We specifically made sure that we put it as part of advertising. So we identified Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube as the three platforms that we make use of. And so what the process entails is we actually we submit topics, so we submit posts that are based on posts we actually found online that were hateful, amounted to hate speech, and was quite an incitement to violence. We then submitted for advertising. So the benefits of submitting it for advertising is the social media companies then can assess the information, the advertisement that you provided. They can then assess whether it is in fact within their guidelines, and then you can even set a date in future for which you want the content to be posted. Importantly, before that content is posted, it has to be approved before you can schedule the date for that, in fact. And what we did is we submitted in 4 different languages in South Africa. South Africa has 11 official languages, but we submitted in the 4 largest languages within South Africa, that being English, Afrikaans, isiXhosa, and isiZulu as the 4 languages. So what we did is we submitted 10 adverts in English and Afrikaans, and then we submitted 9 in isiXhosa and isiZulu as well. These adverts themselves, I must say, they were intentional, they were deliberate, they were some of the most egregious things that you can find on social media. So there was nothing subtle, there was no dog whistling that happened. These were clear instances of hate speech and incitement to violence. From our findings, of the 38 posts that we sent for approval, only 2 of them were rejected on these platforms. So Facebook only rejected 2 ads, one in English and one in Afrikaans, that specifically called immigrants cockroaches. That was the only ones that they did not accept. The rest were all egregious as well. You know, it was calling for shooting and killing. It was comparing immigrants to animals. They all went through the approval for the most part. The benefit of doing it through the advertising platform, as Global Witness does, is that even if you receive the approval, you then just withdraw the advertising. So it was never posted, it was just approved, but we knew that if it was approved already, then we could have posted and published it. So what does this show? Well, clearly this shows that not enough effort and work is being done to moderate content. We use xenophobia not only because it was a hot topic in South Africa, but because you could use egregious examples and see whether they are in fact moderating the content, right? So that was particularly scary. And as Bulanda had mentioned, South Africa is gearing up for elections in next year, in 2024. If this clear and deliberate hateful content regarding xenophobia could be accepted this easily, you can understand that when it comes to political micro-targeting or just political disinformation or misinformation in the lead up to the elections, which at times are not necessarily as deliberate and can be more subtle in that sense, there's a real danger in the lead up to our elections that this political disinformation and misinformation would spread, and that there would be calls for violence and social instability in the lead up to, during, and even after our elections as well. Now, this is not something new. South Africa has had experiences in the past, in the more recent past, where social media has been used to spread violence and social disorder on the political space, but even within spaces like xenophobia and even misogyny as well. What are our aims for this? So we've tried to implement an action plan, and part of it is in due because of our work with the Global Coalition for Tech Justice. But what we are asking for is better investment by social media houses into content moderation. We want better investment, better moderation. We want them to make sure that they assess the local, the regional, and especially the global south, better content moderation. And I think us using only 4 languages of the 11 in South Africa and having only 2 being rejected, if anything, shows in a microcosm the deep problems with content moderation, right? I mean, in Africa alone, I mean, there's no single country in Africa that only has 1 language, right? So there's so many nuances that are in place as well. I think also the responses from the social media companies were quite concerning. It was very wishy-washy of, we'll try our best, but we can't guarantee that we can moderate the content. I think what makes it scarier is that we went through the advertising route, which should be stricter in terms of moderating the content, and we still were able to get through with this. So, in essence, what our calls are: better investment on content moderation itself, but also we want them to assess the human rights impact of content on social media, on the people themselves. So understand the platform that it exists and the dangers that exist, and ensure that there's better moderation so we can ensure election integrity, but even within society to prevent, hostility, hate speech, and incitement for violence as well. Thank you, Belinda.
Thank you very much, Devon, for that submission. It is interesting to see those glaring holes and repeated failures in the content moderation process. Liz, in moving along to you, I know you've been doing work around platform governance. Could you share with us how tech hubs are materializing, especially when it comes to the disinformation industry?
Thanks, Bulanda. With the current trends you're seeing right now, elections after elections, more technology is being deployed, not just in election management, but also in the campaigning. And tech platforms have really expanded the spaces through which Africans can talk about politics, engage with their government. Actually, we can say that it's expanding the civic space. But whether it's really expanding it in the case where we've been telling ourselves that digital technology are bringing good to our society, that's not really being researched properly in terms of its effect. And one of those areas is tech platform regulation or moderation of content. First of all, I would say that Africa is at a very disadvantaged position because the tech companies are situated in the Silicon Valleys outside the jurisdiction of the continent, and that means that most of the time they bypass the laws, local laws in the African countries. We see how these platforms apply international policies or norms, like, let's say, GDPR, which is not a norm really, but a regulation. Facebook itself announced its new privacy policies, I think, like 3 years ago. But how that was announced, it was announced very differently in Africa and in other regions. In Africa, it was like we didn't have a right itself, yet we had data protection laws where they could have followed and gave us the same kind of protections that we have with countries where GDPR is covering. Another thing, apart from this uneven application of laws, is platforms themselves have been left to self-govern. It's a good thing and also a bad thing. But also look at how power is being distributed. It's them who are deciding what conversations are happening in a particular democracy. That means they are shaping in whatever they allow to be online, whatever they don't allow to be online. They are actually shaping democracies in other countries. Of course, that is not a good thing. But the other thing is also governments also have power because through regulation, internet shutdowns, and all that. Where does that leave the civil society? They've not been given that that space for them also to have a say of what conversations are online and what is not online. Other than that, as Devon has said, platforms might have policies, but they're also overwhelmed in also effecting those policies as well. You've seen the ones he's talked about. TikTok also has very abusive content. When you look at it and you compare the kind of policies, platform policies that TikTok has, you'd realize that they should be banning that content, but still those content really flourishes in their spaces. I don't want to be saying much, but I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Liz, and for really just giving us that regional perspective. So Blaise, I'll be moving along to you. So there's been a call for fully equitable and resourced election plans, not proportionate to market size, but rather proportionate to risk. So as a campaigner for peace and justice working in the digital rights field and online security, would you really just share some of your concerns going into the next election in December? As someone working in civil society and coming from DRC, like what are those major concerns that you see if platforms don't provide those fully resourced and equitable elections plans?
Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Une minute. Ok. Alors, je voudrais un peu vous parler du contexte de mon pays et de ce qui se passe. En fait, juste une petite situation d'une manière générale. En République démocratique du Congo, nous allons organiser les élections au mois de décembre 2023. Donc, déjà dans les 3 mois à venir. Et par rapport au passé, nous avons déjà connu plusieurs coupures d'Internet lors des périodes de vives tensions politiques. Mais ce qui est à souligner, c'est que durant les 5 dernières années, avec les présidents actuels, on n'a pas encore connu une telle situation et on espère vraiment que ça va évoluer dans ce sens-là. Alors, par rapport à la situation sur les plateformes numériques en République démocratique du Congo et plus particulièrement le médias sociaux, au fait, ce qui se passe d'une manière générale à la veille des élections, c'est que nous constatons au fait que les plateformes numériques ou bien les médias sociaux sont utilisés comme des foyers de préparation à la violence. Donc, il existe des groupes restreints, il existe des groupes aussi publics dans lesquels plusieurs activistes, plusieurs extrémistes surtout, viennent pour nourrir au fait cette intention ou bien cet esprit-là d'appel à la violence. Et des fois, cela échappe même aux gestionnaires ou bien aux responsables de ces plateformes-là. Donc, c'est quelque chose que nous décrions. Et malheureusement, les efforts que fournissent les détenteurs de ces plateformes-là ne sont pas suffisants, c'est selon ma propre expérience. Mais aussi, actuellement, il y a un autre effet qu'il faut signaler. À la veille, effectivement, de ces élections, nous avons remarqué une multiplicité de fake comptes sur les médias sociaux. Donc, il y a plusieurs comptes de trolls qui sont là à diffuser régulièrement des messages de haine, des messages d'appel à la violence contre effectivement une certaine catégorie de Congolais. Et une chose peut-être, je ne sais pas si elle est particulière à la République démocratique du Congo, mais ce que nous avons aussi observé, c'est que les personnes qui diffusent les messages de haine ou bien les discours de haine sur Internet emploient des codes qui sont ici de langue locale. C'est-à-dire, c'est vraiment difficile aux gestionnaires ou aux responsables de ces plateformes numériques de savoir détecter effectivement ces codes-là ou bien ces sobriquets que les gens utilisent pour essayer un peu de nourrir ou bien d'attiser cette haine ou bien ces messages qui sont dangereux. Alors, c'est quoi au fait le besoin? Selon ma petite expérience, le besoin que j'ai remarqué au fait, ce qu'il faut que nous, de la société civile, nous puissions encourager, ou bien nous puissions pousser les gestionnaires de ces plateformes-là, ou bien les créateurs de contenu, que nous puissions les pousser au fait à collaborer avec des acteurs locaux dans la modération. Parce qu'une modération, vous imaginez par exemple, je prends l'exemple de l'application ou bien de la plateforme Facebook de Meta, qui est beaucoup plus utilisée dans mon pays. Si un contenu est produit, un contenu qui appelle par exemple à la violence ou bien un message de haine est produit au Congo, dans une de nos langues locales, et qui est quelqu'un qui est assis à la Silicon Valley, comme l'a dit ma copanéliste ici, est-ce que c'est cette personne-là qui saura que non, ça c'est un message qu'il faut supprimer, qu'il faut signaler? Donc moi je pense que nous devons appeler les plateformes numériques à travailler avec des modérateurs de contenu ou bien des fact-checkers locaux, c'est-à-dire ceux qui comprennent un peu toutes les tendances et ceux qui peuvent facilement parler ou bien écouter les langues locales. Je vous donne par exemple un exemple. Dans les discussions sur les plateformes en ligne, sur Internet en République démocratique du Congo, vous allez entendre parler des talibans par exemple. Mais vous ne saurez jamais, est-ce qu'il existe des talibans au Congo? En réalité, il n'existe pas de talibans au Congo. Mais il faut peut-être connaître un peu la réalité locale, il faut être de la communauté pour savoir que lorsqu'on parle des talibans, en réalité, on fait allusion à la tribu de l'actuel président de la République. Donc, et tous ceux qui soutiennent le président, parce qu'on veut assimiler au fait tous ces soutiens à sa tribu, ils sont traités des talibans. Et il existe aussi un des grands opposants de la République démocratique du Congo qui s'appelle M. Fayoulou. Tous ceux qui le soutiennent aussi sont traités de Pangistan. Pangistan en référence aussi à la façon dont les gens de sa communauté s'appellent Mpangi ou bien frère. Donc, vous comprenez qu'il y a plusieurs anecdotes pareilles au fait qui existent dans nos pays, comme mon collègue aussi de l'Afrique du Sud l'a dit, il existe plusieurs anecdotes qui échappent aux gestionnaires de contenu qui sont, ou plutôt aux modérateurs, je m'excuse, ou bien aux gestionnaires de ces plateformes qui sont à des milliers de kilomètres. Donc, voilà un peu ce que je voudrais ramener au fait dans ces débats, c'est-à-dire il existe effectivement une tension qui est en train de monter à la veille des élections, Nous avons quand même passé autour de 4 années maintenant sans qu'il y ait coupure d'Internet, ce qui est encouragé. Mais il y a risque au fait, du fait qu'il y a certains contenus qui échappent aux gestionnaires ou bien aux responsables de ces plateformes numériques. Donc il y a risque que ces plateformes continuent à servir au fait de foyers de gestation ou bien de préparation de la violence. Donc voilà un peu ce que j'avais à dire par rapport à ce qui se passe et au risque que nous courons si les plateformes numériques ne mettent pas à la disposition du public des ressources qui sont efficaces pour gérer ou bien pour modérer les contenus en ligne. Merci.
Thank you so much, Blaise, for really highlighting what's happening on ground in DRC and really pointing to some of those real-life risks that have been emerging. In moving along to you, Honorable Safari, and then thereafter we can have you, Honorable Lydia and Ka Variba. There's been a greater call to regulate social media platforms or really to provide standards. We've seen this through various approaches, a lot of them, of course, coming from the global north. But also we've seen election management bodies setting different codes for social media use or social media platforms during elections. So really, my next question would be, what challenges do you really see when it comes to regulating social media platforms, and what sort of innovative ways could you as African legislators or could African governments really consider without infringing on freedom of expression, for example, and other human rights? Thank you.
Je parlerai aussi en français pour être plus facile à comprendre. Actuellement, en 2024, effectivement, il y aura des élections au Congo et ailleurs. Et le grand problème qu'on a, c'est que ces grandes plateformes ont plus de regard dans les grands pays, dans les grands marchés, et notamment aux États-Unis, en Europe et ailleurs. Et surtout que là aussi, en 2024 aussi, il y aura aussi des élections. Ce n'est pas seulement ici en Afrique, mais en 2024, il y aura aussi des élections aux États-Unis, en Inde. Et on a peur qu'ils puissent se concentrer les efforts en termes de modération, de contenu, et surtout sur ces grands marchés-là. Et nous laisser, nous, les pays africains, sans un mécanisme pour essayer de modérer tout ce qui s'est fait au niveau de la toile, surtout durant les élections, parce que c'est une période où la propagande est vraiment à un haut niveau. Et par la propagande, on entend quand même, il y a une certaine façon, il y a une certaine dose de malinformation, là où on manipule la vérité pour essayer de se faire élire ou de faire la campagne. Et c'est à ce moment-là qu'on a surtout besoin d'avoir alors une équipe forte en termes de modération. Et comme alors l'a dit l'ami du Congo, celui de l'Afrique du Sud, c'est qu'au niveau des plateformes, ils ont fait un challenge pour essayer de voir la langue, le contexte et la culture. Ils n'ont pas suffisamment de ressources et peut-être aussi n'auront pas suffisamment le temps, la rapidité. Et nous, en tant que parlementaires, nous devons essayer de voir comment amener ces plateformes à nous assister de manière effective, notamment en utilisant plus de technologies, pas seulement avec des fact-checkers qui sont des humains, mais il y a d'autres mécanismes et surtout les AI, donc et l'intelligence artificielle qui elle aussi souffre aussi des lacunes en termes de langue, en termes de contexte, en termes de culture. Donc on devrait aussi faire un débat là-bas pour voir comment est-ce que quand ils sont en train de développer leur AI, qu'ils puissent aussi contextualiser ça en fonction de nos pays. Et pour le Congo, ce n'est pas seulement les élections qui est là, mais il y a aussi la guerre. Il y a aussi la guerre qui fait en sorte que durant cette période, c'est là où on croise en même temps les élections et la guerre, la désinformation, elle est vraiment alors à un niveau élevé et il n'est pas facile pour ceux-là qui tiennent à faire connaître la vérité ou et à maintenir un discours qu'on peut dire de neutre, de juste. C'est facile qu'on soit traité soit de traîtres, de non-nationalistes. Et on a vu, il y a beaucoup des acteurs de la société civile qui ont été menacés online, même et physiquement, vu que simplement ils relataient les choses en disant non, ceci est vrai et ceci n'est pas vrai. Donc nous aussi, en tant que législateurs, nous devons voir comment essayer de renforcer la protection de tous ceux qui auront à travailler durant cette période électorale pour essayer de rétablir la vérité et pour qu'ils puissent avoir une protection suffisante et qu'ils ne soient pas victimes du travail qu'ils sont en train de faire. Mais nous appellerons aussi et surtout nos amis de la société civile qui puissent aussi et nous aider comment dire, à orienter leur énergie et pas seulement contre le gouvernement, mais aussi contre aussi ces acteurs, ces big tech. Vu que souvent nous avons le cas comme au Sénégal où il y a eu des coupures de l'internet, vu que il y a eu trop de langage de haine, mais des langages de haine qui se faisaient dans les réseaux sociaux par un petit nombre de personnes qui a eu à faire en sorte que la connexion soit coupée pour tout le monde. Donc, il ne faut pas seulement s'en prendre au gouvernement en disant pourquoi est-ce qu'on a coupé la connexion, mais aller et remonter plus loin, essayer de mettre plus de responsabilités à ces big tech pour faire en sorte que ces langages de haine qui viennent et polluer la toile puissent être d'une façon ou d'une autre minimisés et permettre à ce que le contenu positif puisse circuler au maximum et permettre aux utilisateurs normaux de l'Internet de pouvoir jouir aussi de leurs droits.
Thank you very much for that submission. And Honorable Lydia, I'll now move on to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Taking the statistics and looking at 2024, you can see that the figures are very high. Over 80 countries, over 2 billion people, definitely will have problems in the various countries. In Ghana alone, I can imagine what will happen because we have about 18 million people who will be going to the polls in 2024. So definitely there will be issues. As we as politicians or as members of parliament, what we do in our country is to make sure that the necessary laws are enacted so that whatever the big techs are going to, or big tech companies are going to be working in our country, follow the laid down rules and regulations. For us, elections is always, you can never have an election without violence. Definitely there will be violence, but they should be minimized. And the violence is as a result of misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and even sometimes just physical appearance or normal speeches, normal statements made by politicians and their allies. So therefore, for us to look at that particular aspect in politics or in elections, Ghana as an example, our democracy is one of the youngest democracies, just about 30 years old. We have started talking, we started engagement, we started all the necessary preparations, because people look at elections as an event. It's a process, and the process must start now, from today until the elections is won. Governments in power want to maintain power. Opposition want to come to power. So what do? There's power struggle. And once there's power struggle, there's going to be a lot of information up there. But as to which one is good, as to which one is bad, it's up to the people to determine which one is good and which one is bad. And that is why in Ghana, for instance, we have the data protection law, we have the right to information law, we have the National Communication Authority law, we have the cyber security law, and we even have the Ministry of Communication and Digitalization itself that regulates all the tech companies in the country, such that when a particular information is produced and it has the ability of creating fear and panic in the country, it is picked up. For instance, let me give you a typical example in Ghana. In Ghana, when you have a nude picture of a child and you are caught on your phone, it's an offense. And once that offense has been picked, the Cyber Security Authority have it. They will block it immediately. You can't transmit it to any other person. Once the information is you can't transmit it to other person. So everything is put in check to make sure that any information that has the ability of creating chaos in Ghana is taken care of. We do this by using the big text, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, all the social media handles, so that we don't end up, for instance, in the 2020 elections, we had some few issues, and we lost about 6 people. Losing the life of 6 people is much. So currently we have started IPAC, that is inter-party organization, civil society, NGOs have started working with the Electoral Commission to make sure that every party put a commitment at this point that, look, we are going to have our members going onto the polls and we are going to have campaign. Everybody should be circumspect in whatever campaign you put up there. But you don't go there going to do your campaign on social media, or your people are doing campaign on social media and they begin to create speeches, they create statements, they make sometimes they will just cartoon, just a normal cartoon, and they will cartoon and it is sending an information which is a misinformation or a disinformation into the society. So as Ghanaians, we have decided that, look, let us take this thing as serious as possible, because a whole one chapter of our constitution is devoted to freedom of expression, to human rights. Therefore, if we are working on human rights and you cannot work on digital rights of the people, and you don't have laws that can protect your people, then you are heading towards a problem. Therefore, we as lawmakers will make sure that we will use our oversight responsibilities as the lawmakers on the executive, so that the executive will also in effect work on the tech companies, so that we don't, at the end of the day, we don't have information that is there that is likely to jeopardize our elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Lydia, for really highlighting some of the innovative ways that you could come in as legislators. Perhaps we'll now pause for a brief Q&A. Any questions, any burning questions from the audience, any contributions, submissions? Do we have any reflections? And of course, the other members of APNIG are more than welcome to chip in at this point. Any hands? Okay, very interesting that we have completely no show of hands. Perhaps in moving along, was that a comment? Okay. So in moving along and being mindful that we need to vacate the stage shortly so that we can begin to prepare for the closing ceremony. Perhaps Liz, you could speak to this. I mean, there's been a lot of submissions around, the need for enhanced content moderation. But when we speak of content moderation, how do we then balance that with freedom of expression? Sorry about that. How do we then balance freedom of expression within the content moderation process? Thanks.
Yeah, I think calls for content moderation and also putting much focus on the platform companies themselves have been growing. I would say growing because for a long time platforms have been self-governing themselves until we started seeing elections after elections, the cases of Cambridge Analytica and others who are still providing services on campaigning in various elections, and also including Africa, affecting how content is being manipulated. And even when this content or platform companies try to distribute it or try to curtail things like harmful speech, misinformation, things like that, there's always a loophole because these are experts who are trying to get narratives around campaigns. So you ask a question about the processes and the various movements which are addressing the challenges of this content distribution. So there's one, the UNESCO process. There's another one that is through EU, and various national laws, UK, we've seen Nigeria coming up with also social media bill. The challenge with this is that when it comes to regional processes like EU has a big customer base, and so the platform companies themselves tend to follow or adhere to these laws because there's more profit incentive there. But when it comes to Africa, they see our advertising as very low. So even our local laws don't even have that teeth. And I don't want to justify internet shutdowns because it's wrong. It's really wrong in a multiple ways to shut down the internet. But I think some of these have come out of frustration, reaching some of these, I wouldn't say policy teams, but the platforms themselves to take care of these challenges around elections. And some of these challenges can be even threats to human lives. Some of them may require very urgent support. But because one, we don't have context, and two, we don't have content moderators even within the continent itself, then it becomes a very big problem. Most of the time that we have people hired in the continent to provide that contextual support, they can't make that decision. They don't have that autonomy. They have to consult in the various countries where the headquarters is situated to make such critical decision. And things like misinformation actually take the more time you spend, and when the content is there, the more damage it causes. So yes, there are processes, but I think we need to see how we can solve these challenges, how these processes actually addresses the unique challenges of Africa itself.
Thank you very much, Liz, for that. Perhaps as we get into some final reflection. So come 2024, elections are upon us, and of course that's 2023 for DRC. The status quo remains the same. We continue to see some of these platform failures manifesting. Some of them that we pointed to in terms of ineffective and insufficient content moderation. The information disorders continue, and of course we continue to see some of the threats of violence. What really is at stake for our democracies in our various countries, but also even as a collective? Perhaps we could start from Honorable Lydia, then we come to Honorable Safari, and then we can have other submissions later.
Yeah, thank you again. Africa has the youngest democracy in the world. All these things that are happening is a serious threat to our democracy. In the sub-Saharan Africa today, we have 5 countries that are already having coups. We just have a failed one which didn't work well. That is a pointer to the fact that the sub-Saharan Africa is not stable. And if care is not taken, we don't moderate the content well from social media handles, we are likely to have problems. But I also don't subscribe to the fact that a particular government will say because there are issues, I am going to shut down the internet. The effect of shutdown is more serious than when it is on. Because when there is internet shutdown, a lot of things are going to, we are going to suffer socioeconomic, physical, and even probably we are likely to have deaths. Because in my country where almost everything is running on the social media, even part of our medical system is running on the internet. So if there's a social, or if there's an internet shutdown, we are going to be in trouble. So can we as Africans begin to look at it? Because as I said earlier on, there are presidents who want to be in power for the rest of their lives. I think that is one of the things that is causing the instability in the West African sub-region. And that we should treat misinformation, disinformation, and even electoral violence very seriously. Because as Africans, it's likely to cost us our young democracy. And that if it is possible, governments should be able to hand over peacefully when they lose elections. And that if there is the opportunity that you are campaigning and you realize that you are losing, you shouldn't shut down the internet because you want to have it for yourself, and that you are likely to manipulate the results using social media platforms or using the internet shutdown to get what you want. I think I have made a point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that input. And moving along to you, Honorable Safari, come December 2023, you get into the elections and these platform failures continue to manifest.
As she said, internet shutdown itself is not the main a solution, but we have also to see ourselves as the government how we can deal with those content that can lead to violence. And the good thing is that the content came from a few amount of people. It's not really it's not really a bigger amount of people. It's a few amount. And as my friend from Congo said here before, there's also a lot of fake accounts, and those fake accounts are mainly managed by people that belong or are close to political party, to one of our political party. I think we should put it together and see how we can sit first before the election, because we know at the time of the election maybe we'll not have time to think. It's better to sit before. And there was some support. I know there was some support from NGO like NDI, who used to put in Congo all those political parties together before the election, so they can start to exchange. And if we can do the same with our communication team from different party and see how we can we can at least maintain the contact between those teams and do our self moderation instead of waiting for the big tech, because the big tech, it doesn't have the resources, but they don't have also they don't see a benefit for them to invest for the moment according to the market size. So we can, for the benefit of our own people, us as a politician, it will be a good step. We can work together and avoid from our own team, our own communication team, to create and to propagate those kind of message that can cause a violence. So with that we can avoid to reach the step of the need of internet shutdown. But also as African, we can put it together and see how we can build our market, our common market as Africa, and face those big tech as one market, not only as single countries. We have already a data policy framework from the AU that can be that can help. It's not as strong as the one in Europe, but it's a good start. It's a good start where we can at least have a common language and be able to deal at a good level with those big tech, and get them put more focus on our local context, and help us on the moderation. But in the meantime, I think the quickest one is to maintain a dialogue between us, the political actor, and avoid ourselves to be one of those who create those bad message.
Thank you very much for those reflections, and really for inviting other political actors to be involved within these discussions. Blaise, would you really add something to that? I mean, so that we move from DRC and then we can move to South Africa. Your reflections, really, what's at stake in December if the status quo remains the same?
Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Effectivement, pour fait ce qui va bientôt arriver dans mon pays, c'est-à-dire pour les élections de décembre 2023, je pense que si les choses restent telles qu'elles sont, nous risquons d'arriver à des scènes de violence qui malheureusement seront nourries ou bien qui malheureusement seront conçues au travers les plateformes de communication en ligne. Alors, moi, je n'ai qu'une seule crainte, au fait, c'est effectivement, nous appelons, au fait, à la plus de modération de contenu, mais ma crainte, au fait, elle se situe au niveau où il faut effectivement arriver à avoir cette ligne de démarcation entre modération de contenu et respect ou bien liberté d'expression. Parce que, par exemple, du côté gouvernement, du côté politicien dans mon pays, on a adopté un code du numérique qui a repris au fait certaines infractions punissables que les gens ou bien que les internautes peuvent commettre. Mais au fait, selon nous de la société civile, nous pensons qu'il s'agit au fait des lois qui sont beaucoup plus liberticides, au fait, qui donnent au gouvernement une très grande large de manœuvre pour décider de qu'est-ce qui est contenu à publier, qu'est-ce qui est contenu à ne pas publier. Et de l'autre côté, nous voyons aussi qu'il y a un danger et que si l'espace était laissé libre sans une réglementation, il y a aussi ces dangers-là, ces risques-là que les plateformes numériques ou bien que les médias sociaux ne servent des plaques tournantes de ces messages-là de haine ou bien d'appel à la violence. Donc, moi, je pense que la limite, elle est vraiment trop fine, mais cela ne devrait pas empêcher chaque partie de jouer sa partition. Cela ne devrait pas empêcher à chaque groupe de faire ce qu'il devrait faire. Donc, pour me résumer, nous approchons des élections, bien sûr, mais je pense qu'il faut continuer à appeler toutes les parties prenantes à jouer chacun ce rôle. C'est-à-dire, les big tech doivent renforcer cette modération de contenu et en même temps collaborer avec des fact-checkers ou bien des modérateurs de contenu locaux pour essayer un peu de s'adapter et de faire cette modération par rapport aux réalités locales. De l'autre côté, il y a aussi le gouvernement qui doit effectivement contrôler, mais en essayant un peu de respecter cette liberté d'expression-là des populations à la veille des élections et de se rassurer que le gouvernement ne va pas, par exemple, couper Internet ni priver la liberté d'expression aux internautes. Voilà, et de l'autre côté, ce sont aussi les compagnies de télécommunications, bien les fournisseurs d'accès Internet qui doivent aussi jouer leur rôle pendant cette période ici et essayer un peu de garantir la liberté d'expression tout en respectant au fait les cahiers des charges qui les lient avec le gouvernement et les consommateurs de leurs produits. Là, je voudrais juste, je ne sais pas si c'est le cas dans d'autres pays, mais récemment, dans mon pays, nous avons eu à faire des recherches et nous avons publié au fait un rapport et à la fin de ces recherches-là, nous, on voudrait au fait que les télécoms, que le gouvernement puisse aussi signer une déclaration que nous sommes en train de préparer dans laquelle ces acteurs-là prennent position ou bien affirment qu'ils vont respecter les droits des consommateurs, qui vont respecter les droits ou bien qui ne vont pas couper Internet. Mais malheureusement, jusque-là, les entreprises de télécom et les membres du gouvernement n'ont pas encore accepté de signer cette déclaration parce que qui voudrait au fait les appeler à ne pas couper Internet, à respecter la liberté d'expression à la veille des élections, pendant et même après les élections. Mais c'est un travail que nous allons continuer à faire. On a encore 3 mois et nous espérons que nous allons arriver quand même à faire quelque chose et à bouger les choses pour avoir des élections paisibles, pour avoir aussi une bonne utilisation des plateformes numériques. Donc, merci.
Thank you very much, Blaise, for making that point. Indeed, a lot of the submissions this afternoon have pointed to the responsibility of platforms and have heavily leaned on content moderation. So thank you for highlighting some of those national and regional instruments that could be used as avenues to provide solutions, but as well as looking at it from a multi-stakeholder approach point of view. And really, I think for all of us in this room, it's to reflect on how we could contribute to the discussions. Before we go, okay, so maybe Devon, you could give your final reflections as you look at the upcoming South African election, and then we can begin to take questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with what the panelists before me has said. I think everyone here on the stage is in agreement on the issues that exist. I think, if anything, there should just be a call for the social media companies and big tech to implement a comprehensive action plan that then assesses the human and societal impact of content on social media, and then to exercise the necessary controls and investment in content moderation, and that prevents this from happening. I think from the South African perspective, as we lead up to our elections, we've seen firsthand the online hate and online content leading to real life harms. And that is the danger that exists in the lead up to, and as I mentioned, during and even after elections. I think one of the biggest issues is the fact that social media has seemingly had the potential to undermine the integrity of elections, but also to undermine society and to turn people against each other. And in unprecedented ways, we've seen the spread of hatred and disinformation that have led to feet on the ground violence within an instance. And I think these instances have been so egregious And seemingly social media companies have only facilitated this. Now more than ever, the soapbox that once existed that someone spoke from is the biggest it's ever been. And someone can spread their message online, and no one is seemingly stopping it on these social media platforms. I think that's the deep danger. There's the societal breakdown that is happening, and the impacts are extended further than it's ever been before. And social media companies, I think, in many ways are just turning a blind eye to it. Discussions were made now in a multi-stakeholder, and I fully agree there should be a multi-stakeholder dialogue. But I think even on this stage here, we have people that are from civil society, we have members of parliament, we have someone from all over, like in terms of multiple stakeholders, and everyone's in agreement. I think the only one that is not here and that is present is the social media company, the big tech that tries to justify the process, right? These policies are in place already. I mean, there's no reinventing the wheel that's going to happen here. These social media houses have content moderation policies that cover significantly what happens. There just isn't implementation. And I think that's the real danger here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Devon. Thank you very much to all our panelists for really that insightful discussion and all the submissions and reflections. So we now open up for questions and comments. So there's a question over here. Any others? Yes, please, you may proceed. She may proceed, and then we'll come to you.
My name is Nancy Msapali. I'm from Tanzania. I have heard a gentleman there saying about they have sent the laws, right, and the declaration for the telecom company and the country so that they cannot shut down the internet during the election, right? But I have a suggestion that we as FIFA Forum on Internet Freedom in Africa 2023, why can't we make a universal law or universal declaration that every country in Africa must sign this one? During the election period, you are not allowed to shut down the internet. Why can't we make those universal laws so that to prevent people from freedom of speak or using internet? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We may take two more, and then we'll get responses from our panelists.
Okay. My name is Moffat. I don't have a question, but I just want to advise or to add some point. I know the whole government, they are trying to protect their interest by shutting down the internet during election. But what I want to tell them is this, shutting down network, it's like fighting against technology. And then that battle is, you'll never win that. Because this time, the new technology is coming. Like, I don't want to promote things, but there are some phones which are not using this normal network which we are using. They are using directly from the satellite, like Tesla phones, whatever. There is a lot of phones which are coming. So if you just shut down this local network, people are going to shift into another network. What I want to advise the government is to build capacity to their technicians or whatever, according to, so that they will be there. While we are using technology or internet, they have to know another way to make it equal so that they can stop those like violence, but also the good information will be reaching to the people. Because you shut down the network because of preventing election. What about the people who are using the internet for the other service? Because we do business online. There is a lot of youth, they've been employed themselves through internet. So if you stop that, it means that you stop people's life. This is not good. So that they have to build the capacity. They have to recruit the new technicians so that they can go how the way world goes, not doing that thing, cutting off network. It's a local, it's a modern style.
Thank you very much for that contribution around local tech solutions.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bahati Mandago from Tanzania. Thank you so much for your presentation, and everything was quite informative and and eye-opening to me in so many ways. Actually, to me, I believe that when we talk about digital, when we talk about social media whatsoever, the person behind it's a human mind. I did not hear anything about public awareness, because who is making this hatred speech to begin with? It's a human just like you and me. So to me, I'm a truly believer of a public awareness education. We have a lot of case studies where young people, maybe university students, have committed suicide, maybe because they've been bullied because of cyberbullying, or because maybe somebody has blackmailed them and spread a particular maybe photo. Then we could use such case study to educate the public, like this is the magnitude of misusing the social network. I think it should start from transforming our mind, making the citizen understand the magnitude in a bigger picture. Like if you're attacking the citizen, it's somebody's son, it's somebody's brother, it's a human just like you and me. And I think by doing that, in collaborating with the big tech and each and every stakeholder, I think we are going to minimize the risk of harmful speeches and so forth. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I see we have a few reactions. We'll come to you. Maybe we can get a reaction around public awareness.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sitting here, we are wearing so many caps. We are wearing caps of parliamentarians. We are wearing caps of lawyers. We are wearing caps of civil society activists. As my earlier submission suggested, I mentioned that as these issues come up, no single person can work on it. It is about public interest. It's about elections. It's about people going to the polls. Parliamentarians alone or members of parliament alone cannot work on it. The executive cannot work on it. So I mentioned that this work has to be done in collaboration with civil society, NGOs, lawyers, the media, and even the parliamentarians themselves. And I also mentioned that in my country, for instance, there are laws that has to do with all these things that we are dealing with. It is just about implementation. And who implements is about the human being. If it's about cyber security law, the cyber security authority is there. If it's about data protection, the data protection agency is there. If it's about national communication, national media authority, all those groups are there to work on it. And we, as parliamentarians, is to make sure that there are laid down laws, procedures, acts of parliament that will tell the implementers that, look, you are supposed to do it in this way. And if it is not done, then we have a cause to worry. So currently, we are sitting here wearing the caps of parliamentarians. At the point that we are wearing the caps of implementers, we will tell you that we are working the caps of implementers. But as our responsibility of checking the executive, we check the implementers to do the right thing. Again, as you have mentioned the right thing, today the world is advancing. I mentioned that if today you wake up in the morning and you shut down the internet, even people will die. Not that we are going to take food from people's mouth. People will die because most of the activities that we run today run on the internet. There are hospitals in Ghana where you don't need to carry your card from one table to the other. You just put your name, they feed into the computer from the consulting room right to the dispensary. Your name is in. Everything runs on the internet. So if you shut it down, a lot of people are going to die. People's diagnoses are in the machines, and they are likely not to get treatment. Socioeconomic activities, mobile money, transfer, businesses, that whole day you are going to kill a lot more activities than what you think with your personal or parochial interest. So we are pleading with the big techs that when the parliamentarians or when the executive or when people in government come to tell you that because we want to rig the election, put off the internet. Tell them that you are not ready to put it off because you know the impact. And there are people on the edge waiting for you to put the internet off, and their business will run down and they'll take you to court and take their money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a hand somewhere here. Yes, please.
Oui, je m'appelle Derso Tanzana, je viens de Mozambique. Je suis chercheur en droit numérique. J'ai une question pour notre collègue de République démocratique du Congo, si je ne me trompe pas, parce que nous savons qu'il y a des élections en décembre. Mais la question que je me pose, c'est de savoir si nous pouvons déjà imaginer que nous aurons des problèmes, soit pour la connexion d'Internet. Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez faire? Je dis vous en tant que citoyen. Est-ce que vous avez déjà pris au moins des anticipations par rapport à ça? Parce qu'il y a des alternatives quand il y a des problèmes de rupture d'Internet et tout ça. Est-ce que vous avez déjà commencé à penser à des solutions anticipées? Parce que je ne dis pas qu'on aura des problèmes, mais j'imagine, connaissant l'historicité du pays. C'est juste une idée pour savoir si vous avez déjà pris au moins des positions. And then I have one question maybe for, I didn't mention your name, I forgot, because you mentioned that we live in a continent where elections sometimes we expect to have some kind of violence. Yes, I can agree and understand your position, but how can we live in a continent where the violence is not part of our daily life? Because we can find some countries where elections, even if there are 10 opposition parties, there's no violence. So when we start thinking that the violence is something which is normal, I'm not saying that you said that, but when we say, okay, we can have violence, but it depends on the dimension or the impact of the violence. But how can we think about elections without violence? I think that this is the question which we might start discussing also. Thank you.
Please, perhaps you could start and then we could answer the question on how can we live without violence. Thanks.
Okay. Merci beaucoup pour les questions et merci aussi pour la réaction de Madame Bahati depuis la Tanzanie. Au fait, je vais juste faire un commentaire qui est général sur les deux questions. Au fait, s'il faut dire que nous, en tant que FIFA, nous puissions faire une déclaration, un communiqué, je ne sais pas. Peut-être qu'il faut demander aux organisateurs de la conférence ou bien de la rencontre si c'est une idée qu'ils peuvent soutenir. Mais déjà, je pense que ça sera difficile. Ça sera difficile dans quel sens? Ça sera difficile parce que, au fait, nous tous, comme nous sommes réunis ici, nous venons de différentes parties. Il y a des politiciens, des chercheurs, des sociétés civiles, organisations. Et je pense que la plupart d'entre nous, nous pouvons être prêts à faire cette déclaration-là, de dire on ne voudrait pas, par exemple, qu'on coupe Internet, on voudrait bien se comporter pendant la période électorale, mais je suis sûr et certain que s'il y a des représentants de gouvernement ici, ils ne vont pas accepter de signer cette déclaration. La même chose que les entreprises de télécommunications, bien les fournisseurs d'accès à Internet. Parce que c'est effectivement, et je reviens maintenant à votre question, c'est le problème que nous avons dans mon pays où nous voudrions appeler au fait au gouvernement d'une manière anticipative déjà de faire une déclaration publique et dire lors des élections, nous allons nous rassurer que nous n'allons pas couper Internet. Mais vous aussi de votre côté faites des efforts pour respecter au fait certaines normes et certains standards pour cela. Mais tous les membres du gouvernement que nous sommes en train d'approcher, que ce soit les responsables des entreprises de télécommunications que nous sommes en train d'approcher, refusent au fait de faire partie de ces mouvements-là, refusent de prendre cette décision ou bien cette promesse-là de ne pas couper Internet. Cela prouve à suffisance que, au fait, ils veulent avoir cette large marge de manœuvre-là de couper Internet ou de ne pas couper selon ce qui va se passer. Et personne ne veut promettre parce que s'il y a des promesses qui sont faites, on pourra les rappeler. Ok, tel ministre, tu avais fait une déclaration. Je me rappelle lors de l'ouverture ici du forum, il y avait un ministre sur le ministre de la communication, je pense, de la Tanzanie qui nous a promis de ne pas couper Internet, mais je vous assure que ce n'est pas à son niveau que cela se décide. Sûrement qu'il a fait cette promesse-là et nous croisons les doigts pour qu'il ne puisse pas couper Internet, sinon on pourra lui rappeler. Et j'espère qu'en ce jour-là, il dira ça ne revient pas à moi, c'est une décision qui vient d'en haut. Mais bon, espérons que la Tanzanie est vraiment beaucoup plus avancée dans la démocratie et cela ne pourra pas arriver. Mais donc voilà en gros, je pense que nous avons cette difficulté-là de convaincre toutes les parties prenantes à faire ce genre de déclarations pour anticiper des coupures d'Internet qui peuvent survenir. Mais il y a quand même certaines parties prenantes qui sont prêtes à signer ce genre de déclarations et à bien au fait jouer leur rôle lors des élections qui vont venir. Donc voilà un peu ma réaction et ma contribution.
Thank you, Blaise, and indeed for tackling the big one around how can we as FIFA attendees come up with a declaration on internet shutdowns.
Okay. Yeah, a quick response to the young man's question. Thank you very much. I'm so happy you are interested in this issue. Because you people are the next generation, you take over from us when we are gone. It's true. Nobody anticipates violence in any election. But let's look at it. What causes the violence in elections at all? So many things. So I'm just going to mention a few. One is disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. Hate speech. Two, in the current dispensation, there is a growing mistrust in the electoral process in all the African countries, if you observe that. Then three, we should enact laws that would protect election officials, that would protect the journalists that are reporting, that would protect them from intimidation, harassment, beatings, and all the violence that they go through. If we are not able to treat the mistrust that the general public is having in our electoral process, we cannot. And how do we treat that? We have to make sure that the electoral process is done in a fair and free manner. And that is why at the beginning I told you that election is not an event, it's a process. And when elections are coming, you need to start your election process. And the election process is you have to start negotiation, you have to start engagement, you have to start talking, not just the political parties, civil society, the general public, the voters, non-governmental organizations, and even the Western world, so that their impact will not be so much in your election. I think I've made some sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Any further questions? Any last questions? I see we are almost out of time. Any last reactions? Any last reactions before we close? I'm not seeing any hands. Yes, please.
I think I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. I'm Longino Renatos from University of Dar es Salaam. My comment on top of that, we should raise awareness to the youth, especially around the university of the African university, especially in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, South Africa, Congo, so as they can be aware about internet forum and shut it down during the election. Thank you. That is my keynote speech.
Thank you very much for highlighting the need for us to bring in the youth into this conversation. Yes, Liz?
Thanks so much for those who are raising the question of or comment on awareness and violence. I'd just like to make a point that elections are usually not the only solution to the problems that we have, because when you talk about tech governance, there are also underlying issues. As much as we say that tech is not neutral, to some point, our underlying issues also make them not neutral. So, for example, with the use of social media, how we shape how it's being used is what will determine whether there'll be fair elections or not. Also, not even just with the elections, how do we even design things like resource distribution? Because the violence that erupts in very many African countries after elections is because they can't believe that they miss an opportunity to cling to power and that bigger chunk of resource distribution to them. And so these narratives that we see on social media, people fighting for narratives in which they can take to get to power, it's also because of that one winner takes all and other kinds of design of how our politics are shaped. So my parting shot would be yes, this time we're talking about platform governance, but also platform governance from an African also perspective also lies within how strong our institutions are. How is inequality also addressed and challenges around elections management?
Thank you very much, Liz. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for this great discussion. The young man there put up a very interesting question that, in identifying a problem, you have to look at the cause of the problem. You cannot go to solve a problem and be looking at the problem from the effect. He talked about why there's so much electoral violence in Africa. First, one of the panelists tries to point out some of the causes, because we must first of all look at how Africans perceive political power. Africans perceive political power from the position that it is our turn. It is a moment for us to grab, to benefit. And so you cannot address the issue of electoral violence in Africa and leaving out the economic sector, the unemployment. Most of the youth in Africa are unemployed. And so they are easily manipulated. I've lived in a continent where there was an election in the country and nobody knew that election was taking place. Nobody knew. Because everybody is occupied. People are busy working. Nobody knew that in the country. And so, what are we saying here? We are saying that even though some of us who have had the opportunity to be elected to occupy public offices, public positions, we should do our best to make sure that we empower the youth economically. Because whether you like it or not, as young as you have a country where you have 30, 40, 50% of the youth unemployed, they are vulnerable. They are poor. They don't have anything to eat. So any politician that comes around and tells them, go out and do, they will go because they need something to eat. And so we should be able to address the issue of unemployment in Africa without distancing political violence. Because towards elections in Africa, before, during, and after, the youth are always vulnerable. The youth are always the instruments that are being used. Because they are not doing anything. They are not occupied. And so they easily get trapped into this train of electoral violence. And so now this topic is so important that we should not wait until when we have elections in our various countries before we start discussing it. It's important that we are discussing it now, so that we should not wait to do the damage control, but we should try to anticipate as we are doing now. It's a good thing. Recently in Cameroon, we also had a seminar on preventing youth electoral violence, because we are having election in our country in 2025. So we have started anticipating. We have started seeing how we can prevent the youth by occupying them, by singing to them, by letting them know that they have one country. If you go ahead to destroy this country, you have another one again. You'll never have another one. So I want to really thank you guys for this topic. It's very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and indeed for highlighting some of those underlying issues that contribute to electoral violence. And of course, we know that it gets more complicated when tech is involved. One last reaction, and then we'll go to a close. Okay, sir, people would like to know your name.
My colleague is asking that who am I? My name is Oliver Bamenjo. I'm a member of parliament in Cameroon. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Cameroon.
Okay, once again, my name is Bahati Mandago. May I please add on something that the Member of Parliament have said about youth and employment situation? I'm a counselor by profession, and now I'm a CEO of a newly established company. So before I became a CEO of my own company, I worked with a different NGO where I was working as a bridge between employees and management. Around that time, I learned a lot of things that not necessarily Africa we suffer unemployment, but there is underemployment. Unfortunately, our curriculum, it's not really supportive, does not offer enough skills for youth. Youth might present with a very good CV, but they cannot keep the job because of skills. But behavior and attitude, parenting is one of the major issues in Africa. A poor parenting. There's a number of attitude and behavior that you cannot employ youth, whether they have very, very good certificates. So I've been looking around different studies and everything. One of a friend who worked in a recruitment agency for 10 years, he has written a book and he has quoted a lot of data from International Labour Organization and everything, and have addressed a number of issues that unemployment is not mainly the key issue, but there's a number of issues with the youth need to be addressed. As I said, skills gap, behavior and attitude, and the curriculum has to be reviewed in a number of ways. Youth are not very creative. Myself, I'm thinking like, okay, I was expecting to have these young people around me. They'll come with a lot of ideas and everything, but I feel they're sucking from me. I'm thinking, hello, you have to think. You are working on the program that you have to be very creative. You have to customize and everything, but hardly can think outside the box. But again, I came to learn why there is a violence around during voting time whatsoever. It's because our prolonged history of poverty hurt. There is fear of letting go. There is fear of what will take place after I've let go of this. We have history of a president being jailed when they let go of the power, like in Zambia, for instance. I remember our late Mwalimu Nyerere, he had to travel to Zambia to even beg Mr. Kaunda to eat because he was about to starve himself to die after he was confined in jail. So fear also is something need to be addressed. And because people are fearing to be jailed or for losing like economic power. So I thought I should highlight on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for highlighting that. I've just been reminded that we need to wrap up. Really, when we look at platform accountability in Africa, looking at all the various submissions from our panelists and of course from the audience, I think the biggest takeaway is really that we need to see the provision of fully resourced and equitable elections plans by the big techs that are proportionate to risk and not market size. Again, which begs the question if any of us have seen some of the elections plans for some of the countries with elections next year. Of course, there are some structural issues that exist and really influence how we are using tech within the context of elections, but that indeed every stakeholder has a role to play. And it's really a call to action to most of us in this room and to some of our government institutions. And lastly, I suppose we are all living with high expectations. I know there were some commitments around not shutting down the internet in the coming elections. So DRC, Ghana, we are watching you next year. And I suppose we can always pick up that conversation again at the next FIFA. So thank you very much to our panelists for being here, for all your interesting insights, and a big thank you to the audience. And I would call this session to a close. Thank you very much.